Hi, I'm Kristin Omdahl and welcome back to my studio. In this series of videos, we're going to walk step by step through the fundamentals of reading crochet charts. Please follow each of the videos as each one will go through a different component that you will need to be successful at reading crochet charts. Let's get started. Learning how to read crochet charts is like learning another language. First, you need to learn the letters. Then you need to learn how the letters combine to make words, then how the words combine to make sentences, and then how those sentences combine to make the full idea. Well, we're going to start step by step from going through the symbols, what the symbols mean, how to join those symbols together to create lines, and then when those symbols join to create lines, they work more lines or more rows of your project to finally and ultimately become your finished projects. If you haven't already downloaded the download that we talked about in the last video, how to read crochet charts, this massive download tells you all of the stitch symbols, what each symbol means, and also has the glossary in the back of the download. This covers 88 crochet stitches. It is free to you for a limited time, so if you follow the link in the video description, I highly recommend downloading this. And from there, it's really going to help you to really solidify all of the things we're going to go over in this video and all the upcoming videos. This is video part 2 of a 5-part series on how to read crochet charts. And in video part 2, we're going to talk about how to read crochet charts when you're working even in rows and even in rounds. The first thing you want to look at when looking at a brand new chart is to find the key. The key is going to show you what stitches are used and also what the symbol is that represents each stitch. So for this chart, we're using chain and single crochet. This chart also, from a glance, I can tell that it's worked in rows, not rounds, because the numbers are written on opposite sides of the work. So from here, I can see that we have a starting chain, so you'd want to count those. Then we have at the beginning of row 1, notice the color changes for each row as well. So at the beginning of the row 1, we start with a chain 1, single crochet in the first chain, then we single crochet in each stitch across that row. I'm also trying to word this in the way that it would be worded in a written pattern so that you can start to familiarize yourself with the things that you already know. If you're already familiar with reading written patterns, using that same wording will help to understand the charts better. So at the end of row 1, you'll see up here we change color again, and there's also another number. So this shows that this is the beginning of row 2 with a chain 1, then single crochet in each stitch across. And then for the remainder of this pattern, we have, when we start a new row, we have the number written where the row starts, and then we have the number written where the next row starts. Now, to show you this side by side with an example of working single crochet in the round versus in the rows, here is another sample of working single crochet. But notice how this pattern is slightly different. There are a couple changes actually. So we'll refer to the key first, and notice we have a foundation single crochet, then we have a single crochet, a chain, and a slip stitch. Now, at a glance, you should be, once you understand what you're looking at, you should be able to tell at a glance that this is worked in the round instead of rows just by where the round numbers are written. Notice they're written in the middle of the work instead of on opposite sides on this one. This one starts on opposite sides because when you work in rows, you finish a row, you turn your work, and you work back in the opposite direction. When you're working in rounds, for example, let's say you're working single crochet in the round for a cowl. And I'll show you a photo right now of a cowl done like this. you work in the round, slip stitch to join. Well, let's start at the beginning. So we start with a round of foundation single crochet, and notice how the stitches get lighter here on the ends. That also symbolizes that it goes on to that it would be repeated here to however many stitches are written in your work. The chart doesn't always show everything. It shows you a condensed sample of what's written in long form in the pattern. So for round 1, we would start with a foundation single crochet. Refer back to your pattern here where it goes faded, and then you would come back to the other side, finish up your round, slip stitch to the first stitch at the beginning of the round to join, and round 1 is complete. Chain 1, notice the different color now, we're starting round 2, chain 1, single crochet in each stitch around, slip stitch to the top of the first stitch at the beginning of the round to join. Round 2 is complete. Notice for round 3 we change color again, so it's chain 1, single crochet in each stitch around, and we know to finish up here and come back and look at this side because of those faded stitches on each end of the round, and slip stitch to join the first stitch at the beginning of the round. So again, side by side, this is single crochet worked in rows and single crochet worked in rounds. And I'll show you some examples of this side by side in some other stitches. So here is half double crochet. This one is worked in rows. We have our chain 2 that counts as our first stitch and work across. Notice how the numbers are written on the opposite sides of the chart. That shows you that you are turning your work and working back and forth each row. Whereas on this one, this is half double crochet even as well, but even in rounds. So notice the differences between those two. And then I'll show you what that looks like in double crochet as well. And here's the double crochet one as well. So on the double crochet in rows, we refer to our chart obviously at first to see we're going to be using chain and double crochet. Then we come down here and notice that because the numbers are written on opposite sides of the work, this one's going to be worked in rows. So we have our starting chain. Chain 3 is counting as our first stitch because it's sitting over the first chain, and then we'll work 1 double crochet in each chain across. We change color and there's a new number here, so this is the beginning of row 2. Chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, 1 double crochet in each stitch across. Row 3, chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, 1 double crochet in each stitch across. And now to compare or contrast that, here's double crochet in the round. There's also another variation here that I'll get to in a second, but here's our key, slip stitch, chain, and double crochet. And we start with a chain. Notice how our stitches are faded on each side and our numbers are written up the center of the work. Both of these items symbolize that this is worked in the round, not in rows, which means you're working with the work facing you the entire time and not turning at the end of each row. So we start with our beginning chain, slip stitch to join. On this one we did one other thing different from this one, and this one we counted chain 3 as our first stitch and double crochet in the next stitch. Here we're using the chain 2 that doesn't count as a stitch, and it is definitely a preference. You can use chain 3 to count as a stitch or chain 2 to not count as a stitch. However you do it, just make sure that you stay consistent through your project. But in this one it's chain 2 that does not count as a stitch, 1 double crochet in each stitch around, slip stitch to the top of the first stitch at the beginning of the round to join. Notice the numbers are in the center. We change color every round. Round 2 begins with a chain 2 that does not count as a stitch, 1 double crochet in each stitch around. They get faded here, so we know to come to this side now, faded as well, and we come back and finish up our round of double crochet in each stitch around, slip stitch to the top of the first stitch at the beginning of the round to join. And we repeat that for each round in the chart. So that was single crochet worked in rows and rounds. which has a lot of similarities, but a few differences that once you understand those differences, it's pretty easy to pick up at first glance that this is worked in rows because the numbers are written on opposite sides of the chart, and this one's worked in rounds because the numbers are written up the center and those stitches are faded on the outsides of the chart. I've brought a couple more samples here. These are the stitch patterns from the Ellyn PDF tutorial and the Abigail PDF tutorial, and I wanted to show you what these look like in rows and rounds as well. So we'll start by reading it in rows. This is the Abigail Stitch pattern. You can find the Stitch tutorial PDF on my website to download this one. It comes in all 7 sizes where you see rows and rounds, and you can see how to do it in top-down triangle increase, a square motif, a circle motif, a hexagon, and a rectangle. But this is the first one worked in rows, and just from we've already talked about initially, you can quickly pick up that this one's worked in rows and this one's worked in rounds for 2 reasons. We've got the numbers written on opposite sides of the rows here, and we've got our numbers written up the inside of the rounds here. So let's go back to working in rows and we'll read the key. We've got a slip stitch, a chain, a single crochet, double crochet 2 together, and a treble crochet in this pattern. Notice that the rows have opposite colors as well. That's just really to help you understand where one row ends and the next one begins. So we start with a starting chain down here. Row 1 begins with a chain 1, single crochet in the first stitch, then we skip the next 3 chains. In the very next chain we work 3 double crochets, chain 5, 3 double crochets all in that chain, skip the next 3 chains, single crochet in the next chain, skip the next 3 chains, in the next chain work 3 double crochets, chain 5, 3 double crochets, skip the next 3 chains, single crochet in the next chain, skip the next 3 chains, in the next chain work 3 double crochets, chain 5, 3 double crochets, skip the next 3 chains, and single crochet in the next chain. And that's the end of row 1. Row 2 begins with a chain 4, skip the first single crochet, skip the next 2 double crochets, and work a double crochet in that 3rd double crochet. Chain 3, single crochet in the chain 5 space, chain 3, work a double crochet 2 together over the 1st and the 6th of those 6 double crochets in that little scoop down edge there. So we'll work it in the 1st, skip the next 4 double crochets, and work the 2nd leg in the last one here. Then chain 3, single crochet in the next chain 5 space, chain 3, double crochet 2 together over the 1st and 6th of the next set of 6 double crochets, chain 3, single crochet in the next chain 5 space, chain 3, and then a double crochet 2 together in the next stitch and the last stitch, working treble crochet in the 2nd leg of that decrease stitch. And then you'll repeat those 2 rounds for the entire project. And then here it is done in rounds, where the difference in working a stitch pattern in rounds is sometimes at the end of a round you have to slip stitch into an appropriate position to begin the next round. They can't all be worked perfectly from where you end the last round, and that's just a slight difference in some stitch patterns in the round. So to show you that same stitch pattern in the round here, notice that at the beginning of the red rounds or the beginning of the even numbered rounds, we have to slip stitch across a few stitches and into the next chain 5 space to be able to set up for that 2nd round. And other than changing where you begin and end a round, because that will always be different than where you begin and end a row, the rest of the stitch pattern is generally speaking identical when you work from rows to rounds. And I'll show you that again on the Ellyn Stitch pattern here. So for the Ellyn Stitch pattern, we are going to have a slip stitch, a chain, a single crochet, half double crochet, and a double crochet. Notice once again to recognize the difference between rows and rounds. In rows, we have our numbers written on opposite sides of the work to show you that you're turning your work and working back and forth at the end of each row. And then working in rounds, we work in the same direction all the time, and the numbers are written up the center of the work. And you'll even notice that sometimes we have extra slip stitches to prepare us and get us in the right position for the next round. So real quick, we'll go over a couple of rows of the Ellyn Stitch pattern in rows. We have our starting chain, then a chain 6, which counts as a double crochet, chain 3, skip the first 2 starting chains, or you would be skipping the first 8 chains, and single crochet in the next chain, chain 3, skip 2 chains, in the next chain work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 3, skip 2 chains, single crochet in the next chain, chain 3, skip 2 chains, in the next chain work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 3, skip 2 chains, single crochet in the next chain, chain 3, skip 2 chains, in the next chain work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 3, skip 2, single crochet in the next chain, chain 3, skip 2 chains, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet in the next chain, chain 3, skip 2, single crochet in the next chain, chain 3, skip 1, and double crochet in the last chain. Row 2 begins with a chain 5, which counts as a double crochet, chain 2. Then we work 2 double crochets in the next double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochets in the next double crochet, chain 1, and we repeat that all the way across to the end, chain 2, and double crochet in the last stitch. Remember that on this row we counted the chain 6 as a double crochet, chain 3, so when you're working your double crochet into the last stitch, it would be into that third chain of that chain 6, which makes that part of the chain count as a double crochet. Row 3 begins with a chain 6, which counts as a double crochet, chain 3, single crochet in the chain 2 space, chain 3, in the next chain 1 space work double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, chain 3, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 3, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet in the next chain 1 space, and we repeat that all the way across, chain 3, single crochet in the last chain 2 space, chain 3, and double crochet in the last stitch. Now row 2 began with a chain 5, which counted as a double crochet, chain 2. So we would work that double crochet into the third chain of that chain 5 to count as the double crochet portion. And then you repeat rows 2 and 3 for the rest of this pattern. And then to work that same pattern in the round, it has the same exact repeat. You'll be working the same exact repeat, but how you alter it for working in the round is that you join and slip stitch across certain stitches. So when we finish round 1 and begin round 2, notice we start with a chain 3 that counts as our first double crochet in the first stitch, chain 1, 2 double crochets in the next stitch, chain 1, 2 double crochets in the next stitch, and repeat that all the way around, slip stitch to join, the top of the first stitch at the beginning of the round to join. Then round 3 begins with slip stitch in the next stitch, slip stitch into the next chain 1 space, then a chain 5 that counts as a double crochet, chain 2. The first 3 chains count as the double crochet, and then the chain 2 space, and double crochet in the same stitch. Chain 3, single crochet in the chain 1 space, chain 3, double, chain 2, double in the next chain, and that's the same as the repeat that we did in rows. So we'll repeat that all the way around. The difference in this one being that when we're joining at the end of the round, it's chain 3, slip stitch to the top, slip stitch to the third chain of the chain 5, which counts as the double crochet portion of that chain. So notice also that it's still in two colors, so you can see where one row ends and the next, or one round ends and the next one begins, just like we did with rows here, but the numbers are written up the center of the work to help you remember that that's worked in rounds instead of rows. The other thing that is important to see in some patterns, like I'm showing you stitch pattern samples right now, so knowing the repeat is not that important there. But when you're working in an actual pattern for a finished project, sometimes it's important to know where the repeat is, and oftentimes it is marked with a highlight. So on this particular pattern, I'll show you, this is the Briana cowl from my book Layers Crochet. In this chart, couple of things. Notice how the numbers are written up the center of the work. So we already know from looking at that this is going to be worked in rounds instead of rows. We can come look at the key and know what stitches are going to be used. We're going to be using a slip stitch, chain, single crochet, double crochet, foundation double crochet, treble crochet, and treble crochet two together. And if you didn't know what any of those stitches meant, you could look back in the glossary of Layers Crochet, or if you had your 88 stitch download for how to read crochet charts, which is linked in this video description, you'd not only be able to look up all of those stitches, but you'd also be able to look up their definition in the glossary here as well. I also have a video series here, and I'll link to that video playlist as well, where you can see a slowed down version of each of the stitches if you needed help seeing how to crochet the stitches as well. But back to the chart, a couple of extra things I wanted to show you on here. First of all, the highlight is something handy you'll find on some charts to tell you what's repeated in case you were unsure how to continue on for more multiples. Because obviously this size chart will not give you a finished cowl that would fit all the way around your head. So you'll be repeating this multiple times. You can refer back to the written pattern to learn about it, or as a handy reference, see how many times you repeat just what's in the highlight. The other thing on here are some green arrows, and green is usually the color that I use for directional arrows and patterns, and that tells you where to place the stitch if it's not directly obvious where that stitch is going to go. So for example, on this stitch, that single crochet is going to skip that chain 7 space and get worked right into that treble crochet 2 together. So let's read that round. We're going to start on round 4 here. Chain 2, which doesn't count as a stitch. Work 1 double crochet into each of the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. Chain 4, single crochet in the treble crochet 2 together, 2 rows below. So you'll be working your stitch, inserting your stitch into the treble crochet, pulling up a loop, and end up wrapping around that chain 7 space and cinching it together. Then we'll come finishing your single crochet, chain 4, and then working a double crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. And you'll want to repeat that for however many repeats for the pattern. But 2 things to point out here: the highlight, which can be very handy in some patterns, and also those directional arrows can sometimes be really handy as well. Here's one more stitch pattern that we can go over. This is from the Selena Ruana in Layers Crochet as well. And here again, you can quickly tell at a glance that this is worked in rows, not rounds, because the numbers are written on opposite sides of the work. You can come to the key here and read all of these to learn what is going to be used in this pattern. You could either reference these in the stitch download or in the glossary of the book. This is from Layers Crochet. And we have our setup row, which is to work foundation ovals. Then we have a chain 5, 2 treble crochet cluster in that first foundation oval. Then in the next foundation oval, in the side of it, because the foundation ovals are worked that way, we work a 2 treble cluster, chain 2, treble crochet, chain 2, and 2 treble cluster, all in that same foundation oval. Then we repeat that across, and in our last foundation oval, work a 2 treble cluster, chain 2, and treble crochet. Change color, next row, so we turn our work, chain 4, treble crochet in the chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet in the space between those 2 stitches, and this would be spelled out in the pattern, chain 4, treble crochet in the next chain 2 space, chain 2, treble crochet in the next chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet in the space between the 2 stitches, chain 4, treble crochet in the next chain 2 space, chain 2, treble crochet in the next chain 2 space, chain 4, single crochet in the space between the next 2 clusters, chain 4, 2 treble crochets in the last space. And you'll repeat that for as many rows as the written pattern tells you to do so. And here's one more chart we can go over. This is the Agnes cardigan vest chart, which is also in layers crochet. And just to point out, sometimes the row numbers change depending on how the written pattern needs to be written for simplicity, for multiples. And notice that we have our first color here that says setup. Sometimes the setup row is not going to be counted in your actual numbers, so don't let that throw you. The pattern will usually explain to you what row numbers are repeated, why something is a setup, and you can always ask as well. So you would start this pattern by looking at the key. We have a chain, double crochet, and double crochet 2 together in this pattern. At first glance, we know this is going to be worked in rows, not rounds. We begin with a beginning chain, chain 3 that counts as a double crochet, 1 double crochet in each of the next 2 chains, then skip the next 2 chains. In the next chain, work double crochet, chain 3 double crochet, skip 2 chains, 1 double crochet in each of the next 5 chains, skip 2 chains. In the next chain, work double crochet, chain 3 double crochet, skip the next 2 chains, 1 double crochet in each of the next 5 chains, skip 2 chains, double crochet, chain 3 double crochet in the next chain, chain 2, and 1 double crochet in each of the next chains. Row 1 begins with a chain 3 that counts as a double crochet, skip 1 double crochet in the next double crochet, chain 2, 5 double crochets in the next chain 3 space, chain 2, skip the next double crochet, work a double crochet 2 together over the next and 5th chain from your hook, chain 2, skip the next double crochet, 5 double crochets in the next chain 3 space, chain 2, skip the next double crochet 2 together over the next and 5th chain double crochets from your hook, chain 2, skip the next double crochet, 5 double crochets in the next chain 3 space, chain 2, skip the next double crochet, and double crochet 2 together over the next and 3rd chain from your hook. That chain 3 that counted as a double crochet is counted as a double crochet, so you'll be working into that 3rd or top chain that counts as the top of the double crochet. And you'll repeat these rows all the way across, following your written instructions. This happens to be a sized pattern as well, so you'll also want to pay attention to what size you're making. If you have any questions about this video, please leave them for me in the comments, and make sure you watch all of the videos in this playlist so you can learn all the fundamentals step by step for how to read crochet charts. Let us make time to create, share, and inspire today and every day. I'll see you in the next video.